Welcome to the Enterprise Mobility Roundup podcast, brought to you by Blue Fletch. We discuss technology topics related to Android and workforce devices and how they intersect with business and mobility.
Hey, Richard, thanks for sitting down with me today. In the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about retail trends and predictions for enterprise workforce devices in 2022. So before we start with that, can you tell me a bit about what is a enterprise workforce device, or what's your definition of an enterprise workforce device?
So I'll give you the RigMakers definition so that nobody flames me in the comments later, but it has a few elements, right? So the enterprise portion of it, it's company owned. It's not a personal device you bring to work to use, but it's a company owned device. Typically, these are shared devices. So when I'm coming into work doing my shift, I'm able to use it. And the third one is purposeful, right? So whether I'm loading bags on a tarmac for an airline, working in a hospital, working in a retail environment, it's purpose built for that environment, for how I work, for how I carry, for the healthcare, for it to be cleaned by certain products so that I'm not bringing germs into an environment and making people sick. So company owned, used by employees, purpose built.
Got it. All right. So the rugged ones we can drop on the ground and they don't smash.
Yeah, you can drop it on the ground, run it over with a forklift a few times, not every day, but maybe one day.
Like when my kids bang them around, it makes me happy that they can bang a device. And it doesn't
Do
break.
give my devices that I work with to my daughters to play with because they're not going to break them.
And for context, his daughters are 3 and 1, so they break a lot of things. All right, so let's talk about the trends. We got 7 trends. We talked about a couple of these beforehand and have some notes on it. And the first trend you called out was applications, and I guess go ahead. Applications. Tell me more.
Well, the rise of applications. So, when we started, 15, almost 20 years ago, those first mobile devices didn't have any Wi-Fi and they barely had any memory. So you had a device and an application. And as those devices matured, or even the applications, maybe they grew. But now these devices rival the spec of some of the consumer devices out there. So you have a lot more space, a lot more capabilities. So organizations are loading these devices up with all kind of applications, whether they're homegrown, SaaS. So we're seeing a lot of applications on these devices.
Are you seeing, when you say SaaS versus homegrown, what is the trend? Are you seeing trends of people going one way versus the other, like adding more of their own apps versus more the SAPs and Oracles of the world?
I see it going in both directions. So if you work for an organization and they pride themselves on, building their own applications and differentiating themselves in the marketplace, they are starting to be okay with some SaaS applications on those devices. And some organizations that have traditionally just leveraged a big SaaS offering like your Oracles or your SAPs or your High Jumps or your Manhattans are now starting to lean into more homegrown applications. Some of that is, if I'm a big company, SaaS makes me a little bit more efficient. I don't have to build it. I don't have to maintain it. I can just roll it out there. I don't have that time, but if I'm a full SaaS organization, I may have a little bit of time to experiment, do hackathons, and get some homegrown applications out there.
Got it. We'll probably have to come back to the hackathons in a future episode. But all right, second trend you called out was connectivity. Tell me about connectivity. Where do you see connectivity going in 2022?
So Wi-Fi 6 would be something very interesting for the locationing part of it. Not only do I get better coverage, I get more throughput from a bandwidth perspective, but I'm able to see where my devices are at in space. And so on the workforce side, I'm able to get more information about who's doing what, when, and where. Some of that can be fed back into an organization's intelligence. Some of it could be fed back into tools that use AI to drive tasking and performance, and 5G and LTE. So I'm seeing that in 2 ways. One, some organizations are leveraging the private LTE networks, and some devices out there. I know Samsung pretty heavily relied on private LTE to enable enterprise devices, or just giving a lot of different options for how these devices could be lit up. So you're seeing more of a combination versus a Wi-Fi only device or a cellular device, much more open to mixing how devices connect to, back office or the internet in general.
Yeah, we'll have to come back to that locationing one. I'm interested in more about that if we have time here. Trend 3 you called out was communication apps, and I feel like there's like this like a super big box. I mean, we all have the Facebooks, Instagrams on our phone. We all have phones, and it feels like that corporate devices are finally catching up. So what's your thoughts on where that's going to go in the next 12, 24 months?
Yeah, communications has been interesting. And I think COVID has played an interesting part in it as well, right? So as we've worked more remotely, organizations have lit up Zoom, they're leaning on Slack, and especially Microsoft Teams. And so I could see on these workforce devices extending that Teams or some of that communication ability out, pushing it out to the field. Zebra is rolling heavy with the Workforce Connect. I know Honeywell has partnered with Theatro in some instances, and they're using Counterpoint in others. But organizations are opening up to people communicating just because they know that they can be more efficient and more productive. The other trend is almost a sub-bullet of communication. So communication in lieu of telephony. And so these devices don't necessarily need to be connected to a traditional telephone or switchboard anymore. And so I think a trend we'll start to see would be organizations that have a public storefront or public exposure, whether it's on Google Maps, Apple Maps, Yelp, and being able to chat and have that chat make it down to an expert either in a call center or somebody into a store to have that communication. So no longer do I have to pick up a phone. I'm right here in this experience, whether it's in a map or on a organization's website, and just start having a conversation with somebody about a product.
As a consumer, directly talk to the person in the store.
Yes.
Be interesting how that gets picked up. The next trend, and this one I think was a little controversial when you and I talked about it when I looked at your notes. And I noted it was, you wrote RFID and I wrote, this might actually be the year. So I feel like it's been 15 years that this might be the year for RFID. Tell me more about that.
Well, it might be, right? So RFID has always been interesting over the last decade. It enables a user to scan, hundreds or thousands of tags in a matter of seconds. It's just, from a cost perspective, it hasn't been attractive. As the costs have come down, and as you have big players or distributing players requiring that products are tagged with RFID, the more people that are implementing it is driving the cost down. But I'm seeing organizations leverage RFID in other ways, right? Whether it's to prevent loss or equipment to know where it's at. So if I have an RFID reader, whether it's on a fixed location or on a mobile device that I could trigger a scan read with, I could have an understanding of where my inanimate objects are at, with RFID. So I'm seeing the imagination of RFID actually start to play itself out in the workplace.
Yeah, I feel like with the last 24 months of supply chain being a mess, I feel like a lot of people wish they knew where more stuff was on their shelves.
Oh yeah.
It's like I just feel like the warehouses we go into, it's like the Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they put the Ark in a building somewhere, and it's football fields of stuff, and it's not easy to find things if it's not put in the right spot.
And you have an irate customer on the phone saying, there are 8 on the website, go find them. And, you're, in a 1 million square foot, 2 million square foot facility. And, they just don't understand that it's a lot of stuff in here.
All right. Trend number 5. So this is probably another controversial one, the personal versus shared device.
Right. So not personal as in BYOD, but personal as in this is my device, and nobody is going to mess with it. Now, sometimes you and I have seen this. We've gone out to facilities or we've gone out to sites, and people hide devices in lockers because this device always works. It's like their lucky device. But one of the innovative things that Walmart and Samsung did earlier this year, because of COVID, was give people a personal workforce device that they could take home. And so that's interesting because, now instead of this device being in this protected walled or garden environment where, it's always on the same network, it always charges in the same place, it never leaves the facility unless it's broken, can be anywhere. And so it'll be interesting to see how they manage those almost million devices that they're going to roll out. Do they come back to work always on 100% charge or enough charge to get them through the day? Are people taking them home and trying to find ways to hack them? If somebody leaves the organization, do you try to recoup that cost, or you just, get another device from Samsung and roll it out? So that's going to be an interesting trend to see if other retailers follow. I'm still seeing a lot of the traditional just shared devices. So companies are starting to refresh on a tighter window. So I think gone are the 5 to 7 year device refreshes, getting closer to that 3 year refresh cycle. That way you keep the newest technology, in an employee's hands.
What do you think is driving that shortening of the life cycle? I mean, the devices almost seem more rugged now than they were 4 or 5 years ago, but what do you think is driving that?
Well, I'm not sure if it's something somebody made up in the boardroom to say that 3 year life cycles are what everybody else is doing. And so you don't want to say not everybody else is doing that. And so you say, okay, and you do it anyway. You're starting to see more leases in these devices of how they're acquired, and then device as a service, right? So could I just pay you one fee? It's a constant fee. I can always budget for it, but I'll always know I have the nicest device, right? So it's a bit like me snowboarding. I have the nice jacket and I got the helmet, but every year I'm going to show up and I want to rent, the nicest board. Over time, that, may not be fiscally the best thing to do, but I always know I'm going to be riding the latest and greatest equipment. It makes me feel better. So we'll see how that works.
I think the one difference is the snowboards don't get twice as fast every 2 years.
They don't, but I feel like I'm running something new, and so I'm enjoying the experience versus wondering if my buckle is going to break or my bundling is going to break this year or not. Fair
enough. All right. Trend 6 was locationing or indoor location. I guess locationing in general. So maybe you can talk a bit about that. I think you referred to the Wi-Fi 6 pieces earlier, but tell us more about that.
Yeah, so it ties back to trend 2, the connectivity, but indoor locationing, especially with Wi-Fi 6. And then as GPS continues to get better in these devices, right? So
can you talk about, Wi-Fi 6, why is that important now versus in the past, like with Wi-Fi triangulation?
Because you're going to have greater detail as far as things indoors, in space indoors. And so that becomes, important when if I'm scanning the inventory, and if you want to know if something is on aisle 13 or just near aisle 13, it could be on aisle 11, 12, 14, or 15. So being precise for indoor mapping of a product, or being able to give just indoor directions, right? I could be on a forklift, and if I'm picking or putting away, you just remove things for me as a worker, potential worker, to think about, and all I do is react to what's going on the screen.
And just make sure. So as I think about Wi-Fi 6 gives you, I guess they call it sub-meter accuracy. So within 30 inches where anything is at any point in time. Now, if you have more than 3 APs, those APs have it built in, the devices have it built in. That's really what creates that power for the locationing indoors.
Yep, and back to my, on your website, it says you have 8 in stock. And so if you knew exactly where, or within a meter where those, 8 pieces of product are, you could find it faster.
Yeah, I guess I get probably with the buy online pickup and trying to optimize that helps a lot too. And the last trend, so trend 7, you listed on there was you called it the 3 R's. I guess it's not reduce, reuse, recycle, but the your new 3 R's. So what are those?
Well, it's not Richard, Rick, and Ricky, but virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. And so, like I said, these devices are extremely capable. Some of the newer devices are coming out with, Android AR core built in. And so, as an employee in the workforce, to be able to hold up my device and have a mixed reality or augmented reality experience could become, extremely powerful, especially when you want to get that attention to detail and that repetitiveness in check. So whether that's base sequencing, whether it's locationing, being able to hold up a device in a 2 million square foot facility and see exactly where something is in space. I think you're going to start to see this bleed into the enterprise. It's been around for quite some time as far as being able to use it in Yelp or being able to use it in Google Maps, and we're starting to see some of that bleed into some of the cars that are in the marketplace. But as a workforce device, this would have been too bleeding edge as a tool. And in virtual reality, just giving you the ability to tour or see or be somewhere, especially in a situation right now in the late part of this year where it's harder to travel. So how can you give somebody the experience or training somebody in an environment that you couldn't necessarily go to at this point in time?
Yeah, that's, I guess, to reiterate that point. So you're saying that the CPUs, the cameras on the devices, and then just the sensors around the locationing and other stuff, that's really making that where it's a real thing now. It's not the garbage it was 5 years ago where Yelp would tell you there was a restaurant within the close 2 miles and might tell you where it was in space. But
no, it's a combining of almost a little bit of all of these trends, right? So the devices are more powerful. That's why you're able to put more applications on there. So whereas you might not have had a VR or augmented reality application on there, you're deploying that. You have better connectivity. So I'm able to send and receive much more data across much more devices. And so that enables me, Wi-Fi 6 with the triangulation to know where I'm at in space makes all that possible. And so it's just a continuing of improvement. It's just allowing these devices to do more. And, because some organizations are, not so keen on being homegrown or not so keen on being so SaaS, you're finding, they're finding this Venn diagram of balance for them. So whether they're building those solutions themselves or relying on a partner who has those built in and just enabling those on those devices. And back to my point is device as a service. If I just know that I'm going to constantly get the latest and greatest, I'm going to have some SaaS. It just allows the organization to continue to innovate to the future.
Cool. All right. So just a quick summary. So the 7 trends called out today. So the first one, applications. So more homegrown applications, more SaaS applications on those devices, on those workforce devices. Second one was the improved connectivity. So the LTE, 5G, Wi-Fi 6s. Third one was communication apps. So employees talking to each other, not the traditional VoIP and phone lines, but more of the new communication mediums. The fourth one you mentioned was RFID. It's going to be the year. I might have to check you on that one at the end of 2022.
It's out there.
It's out there. Number 5 was the personal device. Actually, the what Walmart's doing, where they're assigning devices to employees and hoping that creates more ownership. Number 6 was the indoor locationing. So using this Wi-Fi 6, using the new routers that have built-in, or new APs that have the built-in Wi-Fi 6 and triangulation pieces. And then the last one, I guess you call it the 3 R's, the virtual, augmented, and mixed reality. So leveraging the hardware to actually have those experiences. So those are the 7 trends that hopefully at the end of 2022, we'll see a couple of those happen, and I'm looking forward to it. But I guess to summarize today's discussion, if you had 3 things or 3 themes you had to pick out of those, like, are there any things that people ignored the last couple minutes? What would they say? Here's my my TLDR that really is most important for you.
So the first one is communication. Just think about how employees communicate is very important. How they would use it, how they would use it as a tool. I know we've consulted and been in organizations where they've really wanted to be rigid with the communication, and as we've won that battle and opened it up, they found so many more opportunities and problems that were happening out in the field that if communication didn't happen, they just wouldn't know about. the experience of apps. So just because the device is more capable, you have more space, you could do more with the device, think about that experience. So if I have a mix of homegrown and SaaS applications, I want I want to have a seamless single sign-on experience across those applications. Just because I'm giving it to the user, I want to make sure that the user is not having to, have, extra clicks to do extra thing just because it's an app and it's available. And then lastly, devices will be more powerful. So, think about how the workforce could be more efficient. With great power comes with great responsibility. So it's an opportunity, but it's not a must win. You're not shooting a fish in a barrel. You're going to have to do some work. You're going to have to do some planning. It's going to be a conversation between operations, IT, and the workforce to figure out what's that balance as these devices can continue to do more.
Awesome, cool. And your snowboard will be twice as fast next year, so I look forward to seeing you barrel down the mountain at 80 miles an hour.
Or the gremlin on the bottom looks twice as cool either way.
Excellent. All right, Richard, thank you for covering these with me today, and appreciate it. Look forward to seeing how these trends play out in 2022.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Enterprise Mobility Roundup podcast. If you enjoyed the discussion, please take a few moments to rate us. If you would like to listen to future episodes, please subscribe. To learn more about mobility topics or submit any questions, visit us at bluefletch.com.